Medieval piety emphasized kneeling. In Eastern traditions, prostration played a central role. Yet throughout these historical variations, one constant remained: God's concern for the heart's orientation rather than the body's position. Our capacity for authentic prayer is like a spiritual muscle that can be exercised in any physical position. Padre Pio taught that just as a trained athlete can perform impressive feats even when physically compromised, a soul accustomed to regular communion with God can reach profound depths of prayer regardless of bodily limitations. The key lies not in rigid adherence to external forms but in developing what he called the interior gesture, that movement of the heart toward God that can happen whether you're standing in a cathedral or lying in your bed. This interior gesture, this turning of your consciousness toward the divine presence, matters infinitely more than whether your knees touch the floor or your back touches the mattress. Prayer, Padre Pio often said, is the oxygen of the soul. Just as our bodies cannot survive without breathing, our spirits wither without regular communion with God. But here's where his wisdom becomes especially relevant to your situation. Just as you don't stop breathing when you lie down to rest, you need not stop praying. In fact, some of our deepest, most cleansing breaths happen precisely when we're horizontal, when our bodies are relaxed enough to allow full expansion of the lungs. Padre Pio suggested that similarly, some of our most expansive spiritual moments can occur when our bodies are in a state of rest, when physical tension no longer distracts from the soul's reaching toward God. This understanding transformed the spiritual lives of countless people who came to Padre Pio, burdened by guilt about their bedtime prayer habits. One woman, a mother of 5 young children, confessed that she felt ashamed because she could only pray after collapsing into bed at night, often falling asleep mid-prayer. Padre Pio's response surprised her. "Do you think your earthly padre would be offended if you fell asleep in his arms, trusting in his protection? How much more does your heavenly padre understand the limitations of his children?" He went on to explain that falling asleep during prayer could actually be seen as the ultimate act of trust, like a child who feels so safe in a parent's presence that they surrender to sleep without fear. Consider how this reframes your own experience of praying while lying down. What if those moments aren't failures but invitations to a different kind of spiritual intimacy? What if God actually delights in receiving your tired, honest prayers more than your formally perfect ones? Padre Pio believed that prayer offered from a place of acknowledged weakness carries a special power because it embodies the truth of our human condition. We are not angels who can remain perpetually vigilant in adoration. We are embodied souls whose physical needs and limitations are part of our created nature. By accepting these limitations, by continuing to pray even when you can only do so lying down, you're not settling for less. You're embracing the fullness of what it means to be human before God. The spirituality of St. Francis, which deeply influenced Padre Pio as a Capuchin friar, emphasized something revolutionary: that holiness is found not in escaping our humanity, but in sanctifying it. This principle shines through Padre Pio's teaching about praying while lying down. Instead of viewing your physical limitations as obstacles to overcome, he invites you to see them as sacred spaces where grace operates in unique ways. When you pray from your bed because your body demands rest, you're not compromising your devotion. You're allowing God to sanctify even your most human moments. Padre Pio knew intimately the frustration of a spirit willing but flesh weak. During Dia, his most painful episodes with the stigmata, he longed to kneel for hours in prayer as he had in his younger years, yet his wounded body often refused to cooperate. Rather than viewing these limitations as spiritual failures, he came to recognize them as invitations to a new form of surrender. "In my weakness," he would reflect, echoing St. Paul, "His strength is made perfect." This wasn't mere consolation for inability. It was recognition of a profound theological truth. God's grace operates most visibly precisely where our human capacity ends. Your prayers offered from a place of physical limitation may actually create more space for divine action than those offered from a place of human strength. This understanding creates a revolutionary approach to nighttime prayer. Instead of fighting against your body's need for rest or feeling guilty when you can only pray while lying down, Padre Pio would encourage you to embrace this limitation as a spiritual practice in itself. Make your bed a sanctuary. Have you ever felt that uncomfortable doubt creeping into your heart as you pray in bed, exhausted at the end of a long day? Is God really listening to me this way? That question haunts countless faithful souls who, like you, find themselves too tired to kneel, too drained to sit upright, yet still yearning to connect with the divine before sleep claims them. This doubt has silently tormented believers for generations, making them feel unworthy, disrespectful, or simply not devout. Enough when their bodies can no longer match the postures their faith seems to demand. What if I told you that Padre Pio, the stigmatist saint whose hands bled with the wounds of Christ, discovered a profound truth about this very struggle during his darkest nights of physical suffering? Before I reveal this life-changing teaching that has transformed thousands of prayer lives, you need to understand something vital about how heaven views your exhausted attempts at connection. The revelation Padre Pio shared about praying while lying down isn't just another piece of spiritual advice. It's a divine permission that could forever free you from the guilt that has never been yours to carry. This sacred wisdom remained largely hidden, shared only among Padre Pio's closest spiritual children until now. As we journey through this powerful teaching together, you'll discover why the posture of your body matters far less than the posture of your heart. You'll learn how God sees your tired end-of-day prayers differently than you've been taught to see them. And most importantly, you'll receive the liberating truth that Padre Pio himself lived by during his most painful nights. A truth that can transform your relationship with prayer starting tonight, before you close your eyes. Your body and soul are not separate entities in God's eyes. They form the magnificent whole of who you are as His beloved creation. Padre Pio understood this unity profoundly, especially during those excruciating nights when the stigmata in his hands, feet, and side burned like fresh wounds. On those nights, his body betrayed him. He couldn't kneel as he wished, couldn't even sit upright some evenings as the pain coursed through him. Yet in those moments of physical limitation, he made a discovery that would change his understanding of prayer forever. God was listening more intently, not less, when his prayers came from a place of physical vulnerability. This revelation contradicts much of what traditional piety has taught us. We've been conditioned to believe that proper prayer requires proper posture, kneeling, hands folded, head bowed. This teaching isn't wrong, but it's incomplete. Padre Pio learned that when physical limitations prevent these traditional postures, something beautiful happens in the spiritual realm. He discovered the first pillar of this teaching. Physical vulnerability can create spiritual receptivity. When your body is at its most helpless, lying down, perhaps barely able to stay awake, your soul can sometimes reach its most honest state before God. It's in this state of complete surrender that Padre Pio found God most present, most attentive to his whispered prayers. The idea that God might actually prefer our weary, honest prayers over our formal, performed ones challenges everything many of us have been taught. Yet Padre Pio insisted that some of his most profound mystical experiences came not during his hours of formal prayer in the monastery, but during those nights when all he could do was lie on his simple bed and whisper, "My God, I am here." Think about that. The saint who bore the very wounds of Christ found deeper connection when his body could no longer perform the proper acts of devotion. What might this mean for you, who sometimes falls asleep mid-prayer, who sometimes can only manage to lie in bed and lift your heart toward heaven? If you believe this teaching could transform your prayer life the way it has for countless devotees, write in the comments, "I am ready for this blessing." The weight of tradition can sometimes crush the very spirit it aims to elevate. For centuries, many well-meaning spiritual directors and prayer books have emphasized the importance of bodily reverence during prayer. Kneeling when possible, sitting erect when necessary, standing in respect when appropriate. These postures aren't arbitrary. They express our inner disposition toward the sacred. However, Padre Pio, through his own suffering, uncovered a nuance that many had missed. God reads the language of our limitations as fluently as he reads the language of our intentions. The saint who spent hours in the confessional hearing sins discovered that God was far more concerned with our presence than our posture. Consider this. Jesus himself prayed in various positions throughout the Gospels, standing, in the synagogue, kneeling in the garden, and even lying prostrate in his deepest agony. If the Son of God embraced such variety in prayer postures, why have we created such rigid expectations for ourselves? Padre Pio understood that this rigidity often becomes a barrier between souls and their Creator. He witnessed countless penitents who had abandoned prayer altogether because they felt they couldn't do it right, couldn't maintain the proper position, couldn't stay awake through their rosaries, couldn't focus their minds while kneeling beside their beds. What a tragedy, he thought, that these souls had given up communion with God because they believed their physical limitations disqualified them from authentic prayer. This brings us to the second pillar of Padre Pio's teaching. Consistency trumps formality. He taught that a simple, honest prayer offered from your bed every night carries more spiritual weight than an elaborate, proper prayer offered occasionally when you can summon the energy for formality. God, Padre Pio would say, prefers the stumbling words of a tired child to the polished silence of an absent one. This revelation liberated countless spiritual seekers who had been carrying the unnecessary burden of praying correctly. Instead of focusing on how your body is positioned, focus on showing up before God night after night, even when, perhaps especially when, all you can do is lie down and lift your heart. If this message resonates with your soul and you want to experience the freedom Padre Pio's teaching offers, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and write Padre Pio, teach me to pray, in the comments below. The intimate relationship between physical pain and spiritual insight shaped Padre Pio's understanding of prayer in profound ways. For 50 years, he bore the visible wounds of Christ, a perpetual reminder of the connection between bodily suffering and spiritual transcendence. During particularly painful episodes when the bleeding was most severe, he found himself unable to maintain traditional prayer postures. It was in these moments, when he had no choice but to pray while lying down, that he received some of his most profound mystical experiences. This pattern wasn't coincidental. It revealed something essential about the nature of prayer itself. What Padre Pio discovered was that prayer isn't a performance for God, but a conversation with Him. And just as you might speak differently to a loved one when you're strong versus when you're vulnerable, the quality of prayer changes, often deepens, when it emerges from weakness rather than strength. Think about your own relationships. When do you feel closest to someone you love? Is it when you're both at your best, presenting polished versions of yourselves? Or is it in those vulnerable moments when pretenses fall away? When you're sick and they care for you? When you're upset and they console you? When you're too tired to maintain social niceties and can only be authentically present? This brings us to the third pillar of Padre Pio's teaching. Vulnerability creates intimacy with God. When you pray while lying down, not by choice but by necessity, because your body is exhausted, because your day has drained you, because you simply cannot kneel another minute, you're showing God your unvarnished truth. You're saying, "This is all I have to give right now, and I'm giving it completely." Padre Pio believed that God treasures these moments of raw honesty more than we can comprehend. After all, isn't this the essence of the Incarnation itself? God becoming human, experiencing our limitations, understanding our weakness from the inside. Your prayers offered from a place of physical limitation don't reach God as disrespect. They reach Him as perfect echoes of Christ's own vulnerable humanity. When Padre Pio counseled spiritual seekers troubled by their habit of praying while lying down, he often shared a profound biblical parallel that brought immediate relief to burdened consciences. He reminded them of the beloved disciple John, who during the Last Supper reclined against Jesus' chest. This intimate posture, lying down in the very presence of Christ, wasn't viewed as disrespectful in the Gospel account. On the contrary, it symbolized a special closeness, a permitted vulnerability in the presence of the divine. If John could rest his head upon the chest of Christ while receiving the most sacred revelations, Padre Pio would ask, "Why do you think God would reject your prayers because you offer them from your bed?" This perspective transforms what many perceive as spiritual laziness into an act of biblical intimacy. When you pray while lying down, you're not failing at prayer. You're potentially entering into it more fully, following in the tradition of the disciple whom Jesus loved. Padre Pio understood that physical postures in prayer have evolved throughout Christian history, often shaped more by cultural expectations than divine mandates. In the early church, standing was the common prayer position. Recognize the sacred potential of those final conscious moments before sleep claims you. Throughout Christian history, monastics have practiced the tradition of holy sleep, sanctifying the transition to sleep with prayer, seeing even unconsciousness as time spent in God's presence. By intentionally offering your lying down prayers as a gift, rather than apologizing for them as a failure, you transform what seems like spiritual compromise into a powerful act of authentic devotion. Padre Pio's teaching on praying while lying down offers practical wisdom for implementing this approach in your daily life. First, he suggests creating a brief ritual that signals to your mind and soul that even though your body is in a resting position, you're entering sacred space. This might be as simple as making the sign of the cross before beginning or holding a rosary or prayer cord in your hand. These physical gestures help bridge the gap between your physical relaxation and your spiritual intention. They remind your consciousness that while your body prepares for rest, your spirit prepares for communion with God. Second, Padre Pio recommends embracing what he called heart prayers. Short, sincere expressions that can be repeated rhythmically, almost like spiritual lullabies. The Jesus prayer, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. Simple invocations to Mary or the saints, or even your own personal phrases that express your deepest spiritual longings. These become powerful vehicles of devotion. When the body can no longer sustain lengthy or complex prayer forms, these heart prayers naturally synchronize with your breathing as you lie in bed, creating a gentle rhythm that can continue even as consciousness begins to fade. Many of Padre Pio's spiritual children reported that after practicing this approach, for some time, they would occasionally wake during the night to find themselves still praying these simple invocations, as if the soul had continued its communion even while the body rested. Third, and perhaps most importantly, Padre Pio emphasizes the need to release the guilt associated with this prayer form. This emotional weight not only serves no spiritual purpose, but actively hinders your connection with God. He often told those troubled by this issue, God invented sleep. Do you think he didn't account for it in his relationship with you? This gentle humor helped countless people recognize the unnecessary burden they'd been carrying. Padre Pio insisted that we must trust God's understanding of our human limitations more than we trust our own perfectionism. After all, the God who designed human bodies to require horizontal rest certainly understands when those same bodies can only pray from that position. By releasing the anxiety about whether you're praying correctly, you create space for a more authentic, intimate connection with the divine presence. The transformation that awaits you through this teaching isn't merely about prayer technique. It's about a fundamental shift in how you understand your relationship with God. By embracing Padre Pio's wisdom about praying while lying down, you're not simply adopting a more convenient approach to devotion, you're accepting a profound theological truth, that God desires authenticity over performance, presence over posture, consistency over formality. This understanding liberates not just your prayer life, but your entire spiritual journey from the heavy yoke of religious perfectionism that Jesus himself rejected. Consider how this might ripple through other areas of your faith. If God welcomes your tired horizontal prayers with love rather than disappointment, perhaps he also receives other aspects of your imperfect devotion with similar compassion. Perhaps the times when your mind wanders during prayer, when your attention fragments during worship, when your fasting or almsgiving falls short of your intentions, perhaps all these supposed failures look different through the eyes of divine love than they do through the lens of human judgment. Padre Pio's teaching about praying while lying down offers a glimpse into a God who understands human limitation from the inside, having experienced it himself in the person of Jesus Christ. The invitation before you tonight is simple but profound. Don't wait for perfect circumstances to pray. Don't postpone communion with God until you can kneel for the proper amount of time or maintain the correct posture. Instead, bring God your authentic self, tired, horizontal, perhaps barely, conscious, and trust that this offering is precisely what He desires from you in this moment. As you lie in bed tonight, remember Padre Pio's assurance that some of history's most powerful prayers have been whispered from pillows, not proclaimed from pews. Make your bed an altar. Allow your physical vulnerability to become spiritual receptivity. And as you drift toward sleep, held in the arms of divine love, know that your imperfect prayer is being perfectly received by the God who created both prayer and sleep as gifts for His beloved children.